for the position, and we have had plenty of applicants for the job. We are starting to go through this week to narrow it down to the right candidates. Secondly, and as everyone is aware, there's an unprecedented global pandemic on with COVID-19. And the good news is on that front is that our healthcare system has not been overrun by the disease. The bad news is that it's destroyed a lot of small businesses and our economy as a whole. Right now, we are focused on getting through the next couple of weeks, and we're looking forward to entering phase 2 and starting to open our city back up. After we get through this, I think it will be important to look back and see what could have been done differently at a local, state, national, and global level once we have all the information in front of us. But until then, my focus is managing us through these times the best that we can. When I stood up to offer myself to this position, what I saw the biggest challenge in Camas was around communication. First and foremost, our website is not that great. It's something the city is working on. And right before we went into the stay-at-home order, we were on the way to doing that. But it does need a total overhaul, which we've already started the process. I feel confident that we can have the new updated website up and running by the end of the year. People can't get involved to make a difference unless they have the correct facts and they have trusted sources to get them from. And that's what I intend for this new version of our website to provide. I wanted to make it more accessible to find and get correct information and what's happening in our town. I want people to know how they can participate in ways that gets results, that helps our community, that strengthens us all. Camas is a small town, but I believe that together our community can really do some big things. Camas is an old town with deep and honorable roots. And I am honored to be part of this town and to help lead this town. I believe myself and my team are leading with positive values and respect is at the forefront of those values. I understand that these are challenging times and emotions can run high. However, I have an expectation that everyone communicates in a respectful way. I have set that tone with my staff and with the council, and I have the same expectations for our citizens. We can and may disagree on things. However, this can be done in a productive way where both sides present themselves with respectful candor and not contempt. I recognize that I'm not your typical mayor. For one, I came into this position with zero government or political experience. This was not something on my bucket list. I never dreamt that I would be a mayor of our city, but the timing was right. And thanks to the support of many of you, I will be holding this office for the next 3.5 years. I've committed myself to a single 4-year term in office, and I believe I could accomplish a lot in that time frame. And as your mayor, there are a lot of things that I want to accomplish. When my term is up, my biggest hope is, and I need to believe that there will be quality candidates who are willing to stand up and put themselves out there to be the next mayor or council member. People who are willing to invest their time for the betterment of Camas community. People who care enough about our town to ensure we protect what is important. My dream is to inspire future candidates who will take that leap of faith because they care for and believe in the health and strength of our community. They believe the way Camas looks and feels is important, and they believe that they have the ability to do what it takes to help our town move forward in a positive way. People that make it about Camas and not about themselves. Inspiring people who think this way to call to action for our town will be the biggest gauge of how I measure my success as mayor. Last fall, I decided to stand up for this position because I was frustrated that no one else would. And on that journey, I met with many enthusiastic and energized citizens of Camas as I asked them to vote for me as a write-in candidate. But in those same conversations, I also told them to not write my name down unless they were planning to get involved too. I knew at the time, and it's abundantly clear to me now, that I cannot do this job alone. In order for our city to be successful, we have to work together and keep working together. Camas needs our citizens to show up too. In 3 years, we don't have, if in 3 years, we don't have good people, quality candidates that pick up where I'll be dropping off, I will have failed. My job in the next 3.5 years is to get people to give a damn and to show up and to show up with optimism. Under normal circumstances, the biggest contingency of people who show up to the city functions are people who are upset, who only get involved when they are angry about a specific issue. I know this particularly well because not long ago, my wife was one of those people. The first time I went to a city council meeting was when Stacy came down and complained about losing the Crown Park pool. That was my first experience with council meetings, and to be honest with you, my first experience with local government. It was frustrating for Stacy not getting satisfying answers from the city, and ultimately she ended up having no impact for our beloved Crown Park pool. It was frustrating for me. I saw the communication between our city and ourselves as a one-way street. We both were ignorant to the processes. We did not know what a council meeting was. We had an expectation that this is where you went to get answers. Now, as mayor, I recognized there needs to be a place for citizens to publicly interact with their elected officials, and I've come to recognize that our city council meetings are not the ideal place for this, and specifically set up a time for council to approve policies and budgets that must be held in public. That's the purpose of these meetings. 2 council meetings ago, I said that we would start posting the questions online that we had received in meetings so that everyone would have access to the responses. What I didn't anticipate was turning the meetings into a question and answer section of the beginning and end, as well as creating some potential public request issues along the way. It's also a terrible format for question and answers. Ultimately, I feel it's important to have an actual dialogue with citizens, and that creating a separate place for that is the way to go. At the same time, we need a better way of communicating questions and answers in a more streamlined fashion. We are working on this as a component with our city's websites. During meetings, we will continue to follow up with individuals with questions to get results, but I need to find a better format and form to do so. The last 2 weeks have been extremely busy, and I still have the questions from last meeting, and we'll get them updated very soon. But because these meetings are a challenging place to have a meaningful conversation, starting this summer, I'll be rolling out a new type of meeting, an open town hall, AMA, Ask the Mayor Anything, with the ability for our citizens to engage with myself and other leaders in our town on a regular basis in a space that's designed for open conversation. I believe this will be a more effective way for us all to communicate, and will be something that council members will be able to join me on a regular basis going forward too. As of this moment, I am unsure how I will roll it out currently, but I'm looking forward to, and we'll get the information out to you as soon as we firm up the plans. So, we have a lot going on in Camas right now. Not everything is perfect, but we are constantly working together towards identifying our issues and solving our problems. And I think it's very important to emphasize both sides of that equation, that with as many moving parts as there are to an entire city, there will always be things that need to be fixed. And conversely, that myself and my team are actively making improvements to make Camas a better place to live, work, and enjoy too. It's important not to get caught up in emotions on a singular issue. It's important to keep a perspective of all the moving parts, to see and acknowledge all of the good we have going on in this city. It is important to not only be realistic, but optimistic, to be engaged, to be thoughtful, and to be respectful. And now is a time more than ever that we as neighbors and friends in Camas need to come together and work together as we go through these strange times and help each other work together to build a future we can all enjoy. We are all here because we love this place and we enjoy living here because we want the best for this place and our community. I know that's why you're here too, and Camas absolutely needs you, our citizens, as part of this equation for success. Thank you for your time and your vote of confidence. I'm pretty sure I went over my 3 minutes there, but I'm happy to be here. And even though my hair is a little bit grayer than it was last fall, I'm still very optimistic for what the future of Camas can be when we all work together, and I truly believe that we can. So with that, I'm going to open it up to public comments. I'll hand it back over to you, Heather.
Okay, first up, we have Scott McElhaney.
All right, thank you very much. You hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Scott McElhaney, 4227 Northwest Sage Loop here in Camas. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That was very inspiring, and I appreciate that. Good history and a reminder of why you got elected. You know, there were so many of us behind you, myself included, and I appreciate that. And I'm really looking forward to AMA. That's great. Ask Mayor anything. Start my questions. For first part of my comments, I may not get through all of it, is I want to talk about the QUEDA, or the Camas Washougal Economic Development Association, and what's going on with that. Early on, the mayor introduced a code of ethics to be put in place for the elected officials in Camas, and I was in attendance during most of those public discussions. And I was very happy and pleased that between the council members and the mayor, everybody was on board. I don't think there was any issue around passing a code of ethics, you know, whatever form that ended up being, and it ended up being under state regulations, and it was great. So I really appreciate that. But now fast forward to this Quita issue. It's perfect timing that occurred. So I appreciate the foresight and the city council working with the mayor at the time and approving that. I also want to comment and appreciate the city operations, however it's connected. Read most, if not all, of the reports, the audits, police reports, and so on. And this is completely expected. I had no concerns it was going to be anything other than that the city of Camas has absolutely no culpability for what occurred with Quita. In none of the public reports is the city of Camas listed as any party to this, other than being a victim to the alleged crime of fraud that may have occurred. So I expect nothing less. Appreciate this city has a great history of operations and passing audits with flying colors, and so on. I also want to thank the city for being positive around this, about this, not taking us down. Because this really, again, this had nothing to do with the city of Camas. And on another note, I want to say kudos really to the city in general. The fact that
let you know you have 20 seconds.
I'll do it. That we had lots of issues with our businesses. Many businesses were affected, but from what I understand, none are going out of business. And if anything occurs, the city's right on it, whether it be the council members, the mayor, or the city themselves. And I really appreciate all of you being proactive in that matter and really trying whatever you can do to protect our businesses in Camas. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Judith. We can kind of hear you.
I think we might have some technical issues there.
Judah, I'm going to go ahead and remute you. And if you're able to rejoin the meeting, maybe dial back in again, and then we can get you back in the queue and return back to you if that's all right. Okay, next we have Randall Friedman.
Good evening, Randall Friedman, 1187 Northwest 10th Avenue. I appreciate the effort underway to respond to my questions and understand it takes time to do it right. This council faces decisions key to our city's future, and accurate information is vital. I understand everyone's priority is the COVID-19 world. Part of this is understanding COVID-19 may bring fundamental changes to the structure of cities. Recent national discussion speaks to radical changes in the structure of offices and therefore cities. With so many professional jobs now working from homes, employers are taking note. They may not want to renew lease options on expensive downtown real estate. People see a quality of life with family and relief from commutes. In a world that is frowning on being so packed together, do they want to stay in pricey urban areas or consider alternatives? Outer tier cities like Camas, with our fantastic schools, natural assets, and walkability, have new appeal. Especially appealing may be cities still having a downtown core, but on a much more livable level. Camas may face a wave of people no longer tethered to downtown Portland. We should be ready. We can benefit from this wave. Through good planning, we can also make sure Camas maintains the charming historic downtown we all cherish. North Shore planning provides questionable preparation to Camas from this wave. It benefits a handful of landowners already having needed entitlements and just awaiting public review of specific plans. I'm not saying the North Shore is irrelevant. To the contrary, it is an important part of Camas. I question whether we should pay for this round of planning at the expense of downtown. Downtown is what makes Camas. Part of the Aquatic Center's defeat was turning its back on our historic downtown. The Crown Park Pool had served our historic downtown for decades. Its closure and removal took that neighborhood resource away. It also presumed taxpayer finances were endless. I hope we learned Camas loves its downtown. Camas needs a planned downtown and also care for fiscal prudence. We really do need a pause as the world rethinks living in a post COVID-19 world. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Randall.
Okay, we're going to go back and see if Judith has a better connection now.
Can you hear me now?
We
And I
can,
don't
yeah.
sound like Minnie Mouse anymore? Good. All right, I need a better camera. I'm sorry about that. This is Judith Lawrence. I live at 904 Northwest 44th Avenue. And I just wanted to voice my appreciation and respect to Mayor Barry, every single council member and every single support staff who's been navigating through this crisis and are tirelessly working on making sure that that Camas is and will be okay. After following the city's work up over the past 6 months now, I understand that the behind the scene happenings combined with sometimes crippling state and federal rules and regulations are so much greater and more complex than what is perceivable from the other side. It is refreshing to see the effort the mayor is making toward keeping the public aware and updated of the goings on through all his YouTube videos. So far, I've counted 11 of them. Another positive I've noticed that the city's website and social media site is frequently updated. I am grateful he's choosing to follow science-based leadership in helping keeping our citizens safe and following best practices in keeping our city moving forward with projects and reopening. Glad to see all the positive outreach programs that were created and are being utilized. One of them is the Support Local and Safe initiative, and then the COVID Community Help Hotline, and then the Positive Impact Shout Out program, where folks nominate people in the community who are making a positive difference. Again, just want to say thank you for staying positive in all of your doings and providing strong and transparent leadership through this unexpected time of uncertainty. You have my trust and support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy. You just made my evening. That was very nice. And Connie gets all the credit for the website she's been doing, but that was very nice. Thank you very much.
Okay. Recue my timer here. All right. We have Phil W.
Can you hear me?
You
Yes.
can.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So for a little background, the Mayor was speaking of Camas created a public comment questions and answers page. It was released a little over a month ago. And along with that page, the Mayor promised a 1-week turnaround for answers to citizen questions from council meetings and email there. I'm not sure that I agree with your premise, Mr. Mayor, that public comment isn't a place for questions and answers, or that they've somehow become overwhelming to these meetings. You've actually fully stopped answering questions recently. You've just been giving a thank you for your thoughts, and so meetings have actually gotten much shorter as I've seen them. It's not ideal, but I think the unspoken reality here is, that unfortunately you were given citizen questions that you didn't want to answer. And so now you'll back out of a transparency promise here, and that's hard to hear from a lot of people that supported your candidacy and the promise that it held. I think the AMA is a great idea. You mentioned you didn't know how to do it. I'd suggest that you maybe review a recent comment from me in a meeting here. I had mentioned exactly kind of that with an open town hall with the mayor. I laid out a simple approach. I hope you embrace it. 2 microphones and confident answers to real questions. So someone at this meeting who's less familiar with the current state of Camas might ask, isn't a council meeting exactly the place where a citizen can ask a question of their representatives and get an answer? The answer to that question is no today, but it wasn't always
So did we
that
lose
way.
Phil there? Hello?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous, huh? All right, so you want to restart my timer, or how would we like to do this?
No, I don't.
No?
I think yeah. I mean, is there anything else you wanted to follow up with?
There's plenty, but I mean, you got control of the mute button there, so go to town.
Right. Well, I'm gonna kind of jump in, and what I would say, Phil, is if you missed the first section of the meeting,
No, I heard it.
kind of talked at
I
the
heard
beginning
it, but
there,
I
and
don't
about,
accept it, Mr. Mayor.
So I don't need you to accept it. When it comes to respect, you know, you can operate without respect. There's not much that I can do with that. When it comes to the questions and answers, what I was trying to explain was ultimately I'm trying to figure out the best ways to do it. But ultimately, I don't have all the answers. So, you know, it's going to evolve and to kind of figure that out.
Point
The
out
reason that
specifically
we
the
didn't
disrespect in
Phil,
my former
Phil,
comments.
Could you please?
No, before you accuse me of something, point out
Could
specifically.
you mute Heather there,
Point out
please?
specifically the
Phil,
disrespect in former comment.
So here's the deal. I don't over talk to you when you're talking.
And
I'm
I
not
don't do this
disrespectful
before right
to you
now.
when I'm talking to you. The reason that ultimately this is not a debate that we're going to have right here. When it comes to the questions, I was the person. The questions were answered. I wanted to take the time to fully answer them because I think it's important, and I held off on that. If you want to get up on a council meeting and then kind of accuse me of saying that I'm somehow trying to hide from questions, things like that, I think that's kind of appropriate.
You're deleting the page where you can answer questions. So how would you not be avoiding it? How would you not be avoiding it?
You missed the point of what I'm trying to accomplish here, and that's unfortunate. So Phil, thank you, but
you'll choose to abandon the mechanism. The mechanism works. You'll choose to abandon it if you get rid of that page.
I don't even know what you're saying, but
well,
I appreciate your perspective.
Listen, that's all.
Well, I have a different opinion, and as mayor, I'm going to go with the decisions that I'm going to go with. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next. I have Anna next.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Perfect. I'm Anna Underwood. My address is 19808 Southeast 36th Street in Camas. Thank you, Mayor McDonald. I appreciate your insight and introduction into the meeting today. On Saturday afternoon, I stood with more than 150 folks to express our concern and support for Camas, its citizens, and its economy. And yes, this idea for the rally was hatched around a dining room table on Thursday night by a group of Camas moms, residents, property owners, and business owners. Having spoken to several other business owners, I know there are many who believe we are ready to open safely now. Our intent was not to speak for all Camas businesses, but to rather speak to them, to offer them our support, as those people who stood with me had said to me. If you want to open, if you need to open to keep your business afloat, to keep your family fed and your bills paid, we are here to support you. And remember, Camas businesses does not just mean downtown Camas. From 192nd to Washougal, there are dozens of businesses greatly impacted by the stay-at-home order restrictions. We did not claim to be speaking for downtown businesses, but by having our rally downtown, we could see and show the contrast of a packed parking lot at Safeway and the virtual ghost town on 4th Avenue on a Saturday afternoon. If we can buy clothes at Target, why is it less safe to be spending money at a downtown Camas boutique? If it is safe for hundreds of us to go to Safeway each day with or without a mask, why is it not okay for a few people at a time to be in a smaller business right now? So we walked through the business district downtown to point this out and to show our support for businesses who are suffering. We wanted the businesses to know that if it meant the difference to them that they open now rather than wait for Olympia to decide their fate. The governor has offered no specific criteria for moving to the next phase of reopening. We know that what the restrictions will be, but not how the situation will be considered safe enough to move forward. It seems rather arbitrary. In Clark County, we have had a total of 7 people hospitalized for COVID-19. 88% of the COVID-related deaths in Clark County have been age 70 or older, 68% over age 80. The majority of deaths across the entire state have been in long-term care or nursing homes. The numbers just do not show this being a threat to the general population. We have the right to speak out against policies we believe violate our rights and do damage to the future of our communities and our nation. We are richly blessed people here in Camas, but the potential economic and personal devastation caused by continuing the shutdown is very real for many among us. We love Camas and its small business owners. They give our city its character. They sponsor of youth sports and activities. They are the ambassadors to everyone who visits Camas. We want to see them survive and thrive.
Anna, you have about 20 seconds left.
Thank you, I'm done.
Thank you very much for your comments, Anna.
Okay, we have Tara.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Great. I'm Tara Pitchford. I've spoke to you guys a couple of times before during this section of the meetings. I'm the political director for Camas for Cannabis Access. And for the record, we're PO Box 992. I just wanted to give you guys a quick update today, let you know where we're at since the pandemic has hit the globe. To start out, we had hit the ground and started doing canvassing efforts with our petition right before the virus hit. And in just under 2 weeks and some time spent out in District 1, we collected several hundred valid signatures of registered voters in the city that were in support of increasing access to cannabis in the city limits. And then unfortunately, as we know, the virus hit and the shelter-in-place orders took effect. And in that process, the governor and the state deemed cannabis businesses essential right out the gate. There was no in between time for us. So the stores were asked to practice social distancing measures and curbside delivery options were open. And because of that, we were able to continue providing folks with the medicine that they needed, even with the pandemic, and able to facilitate an increase of as much as 75% in sales in the cannabis industry since the pandemic hit. And as part of that, the industry has been able to largely keep folks employed, and we've had minimal layoffs as a group. And we've also been able to add jobs in a lot of areas since the crisis hit. And so part of what we wanted to just bring up today is just to let you guys know that we understand that now is not the time to be knocking on folks' doors in the city. And that isn't our intention to do that at any time right now, but this is still an important issue, and we still plan on proceeding with the petition when it is safe to do so. And
30 seconds.
Thanks. In ways that are safe to do so. And we'd be happy to talk to you guys still about ways that the cannabis industry and increasing cannabis can help with tax revenue in the city, especially as we're facing cuts to things now. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tara, for your comments. Appreciate it.
Excuse me. Next we have Jared.
How's that sound?
Great.
Can you hear you, Jared?
Jared Braun, 1619 Northeast Franklin. I've lived in Camas for the past 4 years. I have 3 kids going to Camas schools. I also happen to be a first responder in Clark County. And as some of the other speakers have spoken to, I also appreciate the numerous videos and the effort to keep some of the public informed during these unprecedented times. I don't want to go on too long, but I just also like to say I'm particularly impressed with the department heads. I am relatively new to city council meetings. I've been to a few in person, but I was very impressed with some of their nuanced answers to very complex problems. And I'm glad I was able to attend some of those meetings because it gives me a lot of confidence in why I moved to Camas, and that I have confidence in them being able to solve these problems that we face now. It's a thankless position. I think it sometimes, I don't want you guys to think it goes unnoticed. So thank you to that. And then also on the opening comments there, Mr. Mayor, I feel along the same, I'm humbled, and I appreciate your humility in your opening comments. I'm learning a lot along the way. So I appreciate you making that publicly known. Lastly, I know that with the pandemic going on right now, at some point we will be past this, and I'd like to get support or hope for support by members of the city in whatever happens with the UL building. As I mentioned earlier, I have 3 kids in the school district, and there is at times shortages of recreational fields. And so it'd be nice to have the support of City Council, and hopefully whatever that ends up being, that we can then get some more recreational fields out of that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Jared. That was very nice. I appreciate those comments.
All right, we have Scott.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can
Yes.
indeed.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Mayor Barry, I look forward to the mayor's AMA. As you know, many of my questions are for the elected representatives that actually vote on how the taxes are spent. So I hope you can help bridge that gap between the electorate and the council representatives. I know communication's needed everywhere. I wanted to comment on April 15th, there was language added to the COVID proclamation. One of the additions was all city departments shall maintain their ongoing strict adherence to established budgets. And 2, that city capital projects deemed non-essential would be placed on hold. And of course, tonight we've got a lot of new projects and a lot of new consultants and a lot of new planning. 175,000 tonight. You will vote to approve for new pavement on Camas Meadows Road. I don't know if it's essential or is it actually deemed essential if it's part of the city's ongoing pavement preservation program, which I know is a scheduled rollout of pavement improvements. And more importantly, should that program pause until we can better understand what the impact of a projected checkmark recovery that I think Kathy's going to show us tonight. It's different than that V recovery. It's going to be a little bit softer with high unemployment forecast all the way through 2024. Also tonight, $620,000 for new pavement near the school barn, the school bus barn, part of that same pavement fund. And so the same questions, should we pause on that pavement fund? Tonight, we're going to pay $45,000 to consultants for the Austinson Canyon Stormwater Improvement Project, which hasn't begun yet, except that it's not even in the budget. So we're going to take the money that was earmarked from the Columbia Summit project, and we're going to spend it on this new project instead. And I just wonder, does that comply with the mayor's proclamation that requires strict adherence to established budgets? Same question for the Parker Estates Pond rehab project. Tonight, $71,000 more for consultants to plan the project. It's not in the budget. And again, we're going to take it from another budget already approved and earmark it for Columbia Summit. Is that adherence to the proclamation? $156,000 more tonight for more consultants that'll plan the new Prune Hill booster station.
You have about 22 seconds left.
I just wonder if it's essential. 50 grand more tonight for more consultants for the Forest Home booster station. Finally, I'd just like to wonder, are we ever going to stop planning things and spending money on planning and start building them? And so thank you for the time to make that comment tonight.
Thank you for your comment, Scott.
All right. Sean Lay is next.
Good evening, members of the council. John Lee, 444 Northwest Fremont Street. First and foremost, I want to thank Mayor Barry for the open town hall concept. I would like to encourage more rather than less in terms of a frequency, especially given the challenges our community is facing. I suspect the people would welcome greater opportunities during these trying times. Next, I'd like to thank Anna and all of her friends and neighbors who put together that impromptu rally on Saturday. We just happened to be driving past on another errand and saw all these American flags and some great music, and pulled over and spent about 8 to 10 minutes. And it was a wonderful, peaceful, American loving group of folks. And I just thought it was an absolutely wonderful message. Let's support Camas business. And I truly, truly appreciate their effort to try and support our community and our businesses. My main message tonight was over Sweden. If I understand it correctly, we contributed $50,000 a year or $450,000 over 9 years for this. And yet, according to the state auditor, there was no oversight, no accountability, and the state auditor was unable to actually perform an audit because there were no financial records. And when I step back, if I understand this correctly again, we had a mayor that's getting ready to step down, and he's making 20 to 24 grand a year serving the people of our city. I would presume that all members of my city council and mayor are actively promoting business and economic development in my city everywhere they go, in everything that they do, and trying to attract great quality of life to our city. And yet somehow at the end of that mayor's term, where he was serving for 20 to 24 grand a year, somebody decides it's a great idea to give him a $200,000 a year slush fund, of which Camas is putting up $50,000. Washougal's putting up another 50, and the Port of Camas, Washougal are kicking in 100 grand a year, all for economic development. You know, obviously we are all new at understanding what in the world went wrong, but just on the surface, it doesn't pass the straight face test. You know, one of my fellow citizens said he thought Camas was a victim. Yes, we're a victim, but I'm sorry, I can't pass it off that easily. There were 3 people who were supposed to act as a board of directors: the mayor of Camas, the mayor of Washougal, and the director of the port. Well, if the board of directors doesn't demand audits, there is no oversight. So we were part of the problem in not demanding oversight. So I think there's a bigger problem here, and we'll see what the county prosecutor has to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, John.
Okay, in addition to those that commented, we received 2 written comments. The first from Douglas Strabel on Monday, May 18th, 2020 at 2:32 p.m. with the subject of city update on spending reduction, answering questions. And another from Charity Noble received on Monday, May 18th, 2020 at 4:46 p.m. Subject, May 16th Freedom Rally. Those have already been sent to council, and any additional comments that come in via that email box will be forwarded to council by end of business day tomorrow.
Thank you, Heather. Any other public comments, or is that it?
That's it.
All right. We're moving on to the financial review. So Kathy Huber-Nickerson is going to do the City of Camas 2020 first quarter financial review. So Kathy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. You can hear me, right, Heather? Okay, good. All right, I'm going to share my screen and sorry, let me get there. So for you tonight is we're going to review the city's first quarter financial performance. This presentation has been updated from the one that's been, and I'll highlight the areas that were updated from the one that was posted, and we'll put this newest one online probably tomorrow. Given that the coronavirus pandemic was just beginning to impact Camas, we added what data we could of April's to provide a glimpse of what we may see in the coming months. And as we go through this, a couple other caveats. One is to remember that some of the information that we receive for our finances, some of them are delayed by the state or Clark County, and I'll highlight those as well. And we are, because you may wonder when you see some of these, well, why are those looking pretty normal? And I'll share with you what those are. And I also want to let you know that we are carefully, as finance department, carefully monitoring our financial status. And we're working with departments and continue to work within the mayor's proclamation limits. So on our agenda tonight, these are the areas that we will be covering. This is typical of all our quarterly reports that we do for council, and we'll follow through with these. First quarter economy. This may seem like a lifetime ago. It does for me. I want to share with you some of the indicators. They look, we'll all admit they will look different now, but at the time to put we look at these so we can look at what was the context of what you were seeing in our financials. So the average mortgage rate was lower at the end of the first quarter to 3.5 compared to 3.8 at the end of 2019. Our unemployment was stable. Retail sales was actually significantly higher at 9.1 year over year versus 5.4. And the CPI was stable and gas prices were starting to lower. The recession, it becomes our baseline forecast at the end of this quarter because as we saw at that very end, it rapidly happened in March. We'll talk about that. I'll show you some areas where that happened, but especially with our investment portfolio. As the Feds dropped rates to zero, layoffs began and the stock market tumbled and we sheltered in place. So the impact to the general fund, you can see here, the one thing I want, our revenues came in a little bit higher than they were for the first quarter of last year. And that was primarily, again, our building area. Building was still very robust in the first part of 2020. The thing I do want to highlight is the net expenditures. You can see that they are about 1.1 lower than they were the prior first quarter of 2019. And that's because of as you recall, the mayor's proclamation kicked in and we pretty much, we implemented immediately. And that is going to be one of the reasons why we're doing as well as we are. We had the hiring freeze immediately. We reduced spending as a city, close to only essential services. Those essential services were police, fire, and EMS primarily, some limited crews and public works, and we had very limited financial staff that were answering phones for people that might have utility or other issues that they needed to get hold of. This immediate reduction, it will help us as we look at our revenue declines. In the general fund revenues, this is where we are for the first quarter. These are pretty typically seasonal. The first quarter is property taxes come in later, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Building permits they were robust. You can see they're at 21% the first quarter because we did close the offices right around the 18th of March. Property tax collections. This one's an atypical from prior years. What we saw here was that these black bars signifying 2020, the Clark County Treasurer moved the due date, as some of you may recall, from the typical day of April 30th to June 3rd. This collection has resulted in about 466K of less than 2019 with the due date move. We anticipate, given our demographics and the environment that we live in, and what we've seen in past recessions, that we'll be made whole once that due date arrives. This is our sales tax number, and they are interesting. You can see the green ones. As a reminder, sales tax is a 2-month lag. So when we look at the Christmas sales tax, which was we receive those receipts are received in February for December. It was significantly higher, but then it was also significantly higher for the first 4 months of this year, including April, which was February's receipts. And that was, you were starting to see a little bit of the COVID impact there as well. We'll be very interested to watch May, June, and July. But we're expecting, the key here is 3 things that are driving that number. One is the capital projects that we have both as a city and the schools but this year mostly the city. So we essentially, the sales tax comes back into our coffers from some of those projects. Likewise, you will see the growth, there's three things. It was the capital projects. The other one that we were anticipating being higher is that we were still seeing some of that new construction continuing the first part of the month, the first part of the quarter. And lastly, the one that we're very interested in is the robust online sales. I don't know about you, but in my neighborhood, we see a lot of delivery trucks throughout the week, including on Sundays. And so we're expecting this number to if it carries forward, that'll be extremely interesting to watch. It does help with even when people are doing places like DoorDash and they're ordering something even as far as 164th. That is a point of sale for Camas. So it'll be interesting to watch how this pans out to the beginning of this pandemic. Real estate excise tax, it did dip. You can't really see it very well in this graph, but let's go to this one. At the far right, you see it does dip, but it's really in line with what we're seeing in 2018. 2019 was very robust. First part of 20 was very robust. But it looks like when we look at some of these revenues, they're more in line with what we're seeing for 2018. And this is our building permits. And I'm going to have, I have Steve Wall, the Public Works Director, and Phil Berkwin from Community Development are going to help me with some of these slides, and because they can speak to this in a lot more concise detail than I can. So Phil, would you like to cover this one?
Sure. On building permits, a couple of things I just want to point out I thought was really interesting, especially with the COVID shutdown. We know that residential construction was shut down between March 23rd and April 24th. And that basically put a halt to everything. When we're looking at our numbers this year, right now, we've issued 95 single family permits. 20 of those have been in the last 15 days, 15 work days, the first 15 days of the month, I'm sorry. And if you look at historic averages, we're right around 235 dwelling units per year. So we're back into averages. Through the 15th of the month, again, we're at 95. 2018, we had 95 through the end of May. So we're looking very closely at tracking to what we were doing in 2018. Last year was an anomaly. We had a very high year. That was because there was a few different projects, including the Fisher Holland project, which was a 276 unit apartment complex. That complex is looking to get to occupancy this summer. The interesting thing with that is they had deferred their impact fee payment until occupancy, and there's 12 different buildings out there. Each one of those buildings will include a payment of about $150,000 in impact fees. Those impact fees include schools, parks, and transportation. So if you multiply that out by 12 buildings, you'll start to see some good sized numbers. There's our revenues coming in. Other things you're going to see around town is 6th and Birch. There's a project out there, and I think everybody supports seeing that being concluded. They're right now looking at a timeline for the first building to get occupancy in June. Of course, June, we're hoping that we're going to have the next phase of the governor's order opening up, which would allow that to happen. And then in August, they're hoping to get the second phase occupied as well. So those are some promising trends that we're seeing. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take those at any time.
Okay, move forward here. On the intergovernmental revenues, I'm not going to really cover this one because we know that the city is going to be receiving some coronavirus relief funds, and that's around $772,000, which is more than we usually budget for this area of the general fund. And there's also a phase 4 from the federal government that we're hearing might have some support as well. So charges for services, this one, you can see that we are anticipating with community development fees, that'll soften a little bit. But again, we're thinking that that will be closer, like Bill said, closer to 18. Our support services are indirect costing, and that's built in already. Fines and forfeitures are in line with, they might soften a little bit, but they are in line with what we anticipated for the budget. And now I'm going over this general fund expenditures. I want to incorporate April. Like I said, we've been watching this weekly, and we want to make sure that our budget's strictly adhered to, and that and I am very, very pleased with the management team. We would expect this budget to be around 33%. And as you can see, that we are right at that, if not lower in many cases. And that's been the case for departments across the board. So they've done a great job, and this will help us as we move forward as well. The general fund budget projection remains strong at the end of April. That's not to say things might not change a little bit, but we should, with what we're seeing with our revenues, and if we stay at our budget, we anticipate ending the year closer to 6.6 instead of the 7.5 we have been projecting, and which is still the 27% of our fund balance policy instead of the 17. We're still well above it, and it represents about 3.2 months of our expenditures. Street fund, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we're not, this would be normally very active during the summertime in our construction period. And so Steve will address that, I think, a little bit later and tonight. The one thing I want to bring up too is the fire department. You can see that our revenues and our expenditures are right in line with where we would expect at the end of third quarter. First quarter. There is a delay in EMS property taxes, and that again is what the Clark County Treasurer's Office is doing with that 6-1. We expect that will be back in line at that point in time. This is our stormwater utility, as well as our solid waste and our water sewer. And I'm going to see if Steve wants to step in and make some comments about these three utilities.
Yeah, thank you. I think just briefly on all of the utilities, again, they're enterprise funds. So each utility is essentially a separate business of the city, if you will, so separate from the general fund. But through the mayor's directive on the cost savings initiatives or measures that we put into place, we applied those across the board. And so what you're seeing on the side, at least, is a lot of those savings as a result of, over the last couple of months, the decreased levels of service that we've been providing as we've been trying to stay home and, keep folks healthy. I think on the revenue side, the biggest thing there is probably the fact that we have another billing cycle with payments coming in that would be reflected later down the road that would bring those revenues up higher than what's shown here. So I think it's, again, generally the same for all four utilities.
Yeah, we're also pleased to let council know that the utilities are coming in right on target with where we would expect them to be. Even with some of the hardships that some of the families are having, we're working with them, and also that the Support Local and Save program has done well for the utilities. So our cash and cash equivalent assets, April, we were at 80.3 million. A lot of that, some of that is, I shouldn't say a lot of it, a portion of that is bond proceeds. The rest of it is, a lot of it's our capital funds, and we'll go over the breakdown in just a moment as to how those funds are broken out. But here's our investment portfolio, and our investment portfolio, you can see, is at just shy of $60 million in April. And we'll expect that to grow a little bit in May with the continued collections of property taxes, but then we also, some of our, we have some significant payments that usually come in the month of June. So our portfolio, I mean, our fund composite of the portfolio, majority of it, just like Steve mentioned, is utilities, is $43 million of those three business-like activities, if you will. 19.8 of it is capital. Our general funds are made up of about just shy of 9.9 million. And we have special revenues, which includes the fire department, the street department, and the cemetery at 3.1. This is the yield curve, the history of the yield curve over the last year and a half. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit because that makes a difference as to what you're going to see in the next slide. As we have talked about over those 2019, we talked about the inverted yield curve. And the inverted yield curve typically represents a recession upcoming. And so this was true all the way up until March. In March, you can see that rates dropped significantly. And it was a matter of only a couple of weeks, and they went south pretty fast. We were at zero interest rates on the short end for a few days. And April wasn't much better. So we're expected to see interest rates be low for quite a while. I've heard anywhere from the end of 21 through 2023. What does that do to our portfolio? Well, we had a number of callable securities, and in March we lost several of them. The good news is, though, we bought those at a discount, so we made money on those, and so you can see our interest rate at the end of March was close to 6%. In April, we had a few more of those call. Right now, I think that was the last of our continuous call securities, and then the rate dropped to about 1.9. We believe that we'll stay above the Clark County pool as well as the Washington State LGIP at this time, because we still have a little longer pool than those two pools do. The LGIP is about 90 days, and the other one's about just shy of 2 years. And on the left, you can see the types of securities that we invest in. This next slide is the line of credit. This is our short-term liquidity. We use this for when we are waiting for money to be received from the state of Washington, as well as when we have just some short-term liquidity. We're waiting for a grant or something along those lines. It's a $7 million line of credit. You can see that at the end of March, we were at about 5 million, but now we pretty much have paid it off in the month of May. This is our long-term debt outstanding, and you can see 15 and the growth of 20. This is a very, very normal trend you would expect to see in a very rapidly growing community such as Camas. We are well within our, we are rated on our GO bonds at a AA+, and on the utility side, we're a AAA. And we have, our utility coverage is about 2.6, and that's a very high number. And on the GO side, we are well below our, the limit, both from a statutory limit as well as our revenue limit, capacity, or revenue capacity, excuse me. What I wanted to show was that sometimes people are aware of what we use this debt, these debt securities for. And I just want to list the projects that we financed over that time period from 15 through 20. But I also wanted to highlight the ones that we have debt that rolls off each year too. So that's why this number, you'll see this number start going down again, and it's just a perennial thing that we do, and we actively manage it and keep very low interest rates. So our outlook that we have, you've seen these graphs, I'm sure, before. We are in interesting times. We're going to continue to monitor it. Just to look at this from a national level, you can see that this graph here compares where employment changes have been and compared to other recessions. This purple drop was the change with the COVID pandemic. And it's anticipated that we might see that B that might be really turn into a W at some point. But right now that's where that is. And we have the full recovery likely, full recovery nationally not likely until 2023. The CARES Act, you can see the difference between the Recovery Act of 2009 versus the CARES Act. And then you can also see the baseline unemployment forecast. What I like to highlight though is locally, I mean, we understand the national numbers, those numbers are what they are, but locally I don't think people can fully appreciate that our demographic is significantly different than a lot of our neighbors as well as the community at wide. We anticipate that that will help us maintain maybe slower growth than we've had in the past, but we are still a growing community. We are, some of the things that we have going for Camas is that if you remember, all our industrial customers have been working through this crisis, as well as some businesses, as well as people, we have a lot of professionals that work at home. So we are lucky to have some of that. We also, from a revenue standpoint, that makes us unique is that we are property tax heavy. And by being property tax heavy, that will buoy us because it's always a lag factor on that. And by the time that lag factor gets into play, it just takes some additional growth and to push us over. And that additional growth, as Phil pointed out, is the Holland project as well as the Fisher project. And those will come into play for 2021. So we really will see potentially grow. Well, we most likely will have growth in our 21 budget versus what a lot of other jurisdictions will be having as cutbacks. So I just wanted to share that with you. I'd be happy to answer questions and go from there.
Any questions from council? Kathy? Ellen.
Kathy, thank you for the thorough presentation and explaining the revenues, the expenses, investment portfolio, and how we expect it to change. Very useful. Line of credit, you pointed out that for the last couple of months, we had been using it as we were waiting some payments, and then those payments come through and we draw it back down. What is the rate of interest that we pay on that? And what are our expectations for use during the rest of 2020?
Sure, thanks, Ellen. The interest rate is based upon LIBOR, and but which will be changing though by August of this year. It'll be another really low interest rate. Right now, we're paying about 0.25%.
1/4?
0.25%, believe it or not. Right. And so this tool has been very helpful for the city going forward. It's right now, like I said, the investment portfolio is at 1.9%, and here we are being able to borrow at 1/4% for our short-term liquidity needs. As for the rest of the year, we do have, as you recall, we're using some state loans for the Lake Road and projects, so we'll probably use some short-term like that beyond for about 3 weeks or a month, and then until we receive the money from the state.
And then I'm curious, as we move forward into our next forecast cycle, last time we talked about our forecast with expecting the recovery to end in July. And I know that the staff is taking in new considerations every day. How have our assumptions changed in the last couple of weeks as we bring in new information?
The last couple of weeks, we've actually been more positive. about what we're seeing. We are seeing that if we go into phase 2 starting in June, I believe that we will have for the coming biennium probably a softer forecast. I mean, a softer budget than we had forecasted, because we expected a recession already, and then just a little bit slightly softer than it was forecasted.
And then lastly, on the sales tax, you mentioned that we're seeing some benefit from internet sales and deliveries that people get at their own households. So were we collecting internet sales tax at this time last year?
We were not at we were supposed to, but it took a while to get implemented across the country. And so we are now, I think, just really seeing that over the last 6 months much more robustly. I mean, that Christmas number was pretty amazing.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ellen. Councilman Roberts, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Kathy, for this presentation. It's always enlightening every 2 weeks, and I hope you can keep it up. Because I know Camas citizens, not everybody can be on here every week. So my question is on page 23. You have the April portfolio balance at 60 million. And maybe I'm misunderstanding this. On page 24, if you add all those up, it's around 76 million. So is there something there that's not showing in the 60 million on page 23?
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out. I should qualify that the first portfolio is just what we call our primary portfolio. It's one it includes mostly our operating funds as well as a few of the capital projects, but it excludes all the bonds. And so the difference is your bond proceeds, and they are in separate portfolios in order to be compliant with arbitrage rules.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I'll make note of those slides next time.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kathy? All right. Consent agenda. What would council like to do for the consent agenda?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Okay.
All right. It has been moved by Carter and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Now we are going to go around for council comments. So we'll start with you, Council Member Cheney. Any comments? Sorry, that was a no. I'm sorry, you're on mute. No. Councilmember Hogan?
I'd just like to compliment the staff on working so hard the last few months. Thank you, you guys. That's it.
Councilmember Roberts?
I echo Councilmember Hogan's statement, and also would like to say I just really love the entrance, the roundabout entrance to Camas, clearing out all those blackberry bushes and made a big difference. I know that's a small thing, but I think it adds a lot to that area. Also, the roundabout on Lake and Everett Road, really well done. I think it's going to turn out beautifully. And also, I'd like to give kudos to the citizens of Camas for flattening the curve. We currently have 27 people that have the virus. We have no deaths in our community. So thank you all so much for taking care of yourselves. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Roberts. Councilmember Anderson?
Just real briefly, Mr. Mayor, thank you for your comments at the earlier part of the meeting. Appreciate your candor and helping us to understand how you view things and how we can help you and you can help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carter?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilmember Burton?
Sure. I've attended the Columbia River Economic Development Commission CREDC investors meeting last week. The CREDC is currently focusing on educational opportunities to make sure that businesses and nonprofits in our county are aware of programs that they can tap into. They've also been coordinating the consolidation of requests for state grants. So please feel free and make sure that you inform your friends and neighbors that if they are self-employed, small business owners, you go to credc.org website for all sorts of free professional resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Smith.
I'd like to echo what Councilmember Anderson said. I want to thank you for stepping up and getting in the role, and appreciate what you're doing and how you're handling everything, because you have been on a fast learning curve and you've done very well. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. It is an extremely fast learning curve, I have found. All right, we're moving on to the Jennifer, the City of Camas proclamation of civil emergency COVID-19. Do you want to present that to us?
Sure. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is the proclamation of civil emergency. This item has been requested to be on each council agenda moving forward for reaffirmation. There have been no changes to the proclamation since the last council meeting. So if there is no discussion, staff would recommend council reaffirm the motion made on April 6th regarding the original proclamation and the motion made on April 20th regarding the supplement.
Any motions?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion. I move that the April 6, 2020 motion confirming a proclamation of civil emergency dated March 18th, 2020, and the supplement dated April 15th, 2020 be reaffirmed.
Second.
Second.
All right, it has been moved by Cheney and seconded that the April 6, 2020 motion confirming the proclamation of civil emergency dated March 18, 2020, and the supplemented dated April 15, 2020 be reaffirmed. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We're going to go into now the bid award with Steve Wall. Steve, can you tell us about the 2020 citywide asphalt repairs?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is the overlay component of the city's annual pavement preservation program that we have. There's two areas that are identified in the bid. Camas Meadows Drive, which is really the westerly end of Camas Meadows Drive that was not overlaid here a few years ago. And then Cedar Street, just south of 3rd downtown. City estimated about $235,000 for the construction cost, and we advertised for bids. The low bid of $174,688 was submitted by Lakeside Industries. Pavement preservation can be a little bit tricky. You wait too long, becomes increasingly more expensive to do the repairs, but you don't wait too long, you don't want to do it too early because then you might be spending money that you don't need to. And so really the program identified these two roads as being an optimal point for this type of preservation. And we want to try and get the work done this year while we can, hopefully during the summer months when it's dry. And we have a budget that is from the Pavement Preservation Fund in the streets that has been set aside for these activities. Council sets aside a certain amount every year, and that's where this budget would be coming from to pay for this project. And we would recommend that you award to Lakeside Industries in the amount of $174,688. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Mayor, seeing no discussion, I move to award the 2020 citywide asphalt repairs to Lakeside Industries in the amount of $174,688, including a 10% authority for change orders.
Second.
All right, it has been moved by Carter and seconded to award the 2020 citywide asphalt repairs to Lakeside Industries in the amount of $174,688, including a 10% authority for change orders. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? right. Moving on to the Northeast 22nd Avenue improvements. Curly, do you want to walk us through this bid award?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. On last Tuesday, staff opened bids for Northeast 22nd Avenue improvements, which includes 24-inch water main as well for future water service. It's part of the water system plan. Of course, it makes all the sense in the world to put the water main in the road before you do a rehabilitation on the roadway. We have nursed this roadway along for quite some time now, and just continues to get more expensive to try to patch it, put Band-Aids on it. This seems to be the opportune time to do the rehabilitation. The bids were, the engineer's estimate was $721,000. The cost, the bid amount for the low bidder was $620,000, so approximately $100,000 less than what was what the engineer's estimate was. About $55,000 of that was in pavement preservation by our calculations, and about $45,000 in the water. So staff recommends awarding the bid to McDonald Excavating in the amount of $620,000. $620,581.52, and allow an additional 10% staff authorization for change orders and overruns. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Curly. Council members, do you have any questions or comments for Don?
I do, and mine's more general, and I asked this question with some prior knowledge, but I think for public edification, it's appropriate to ask the question. Earlier tonight, we had a comment from a citizen. I'm not addressing that specifically, but as we take action on these items tonight, you'll notice that all of tonight's action items are public work projects, Steve. So this is for you, and I think you touched on it in your preface. Will you explain in somewhat of a summary way how moving ahead with these projects tonight are in compliance with the March 18th emergency declaration that was amended on April 15th that tells us city projects deemed non-essential will be placed on hold?
Yeah, and all of these have varying functions. A lot of them can be related to health and safety. And so I think what we might do is maybe as we go through these, we can touch on each one of the projects specifically and talk about how it does meet the directive. A lot of it does have to do on the pavement preservation side. For example, we do have the dedicated funding that is set aside for pavement preservation every year. And so we're within the budget framework that council has set for us for 2020. And these are, time-sensitive projects, like I said, that, at least on the asphalt side, you want to try and get to them before they get too worn down. Otherwise, the repairs can become pretty expensive. But we also have timelines that we want to try and meet, whether it's a weather window or whether it's some other sort of schedule, like school district, school being back in session. That's up in the air, but it's still certainly something that we want to be aware of and be out ahead of that as much as we can. I think the rest of the projects, again, and we can talk about them tonight, but the health and safety aspect of those projects, whether it's water supply or whether it's safety or there's some property damage, those types of things, we definitely want to prioritize these projects and be able to move forward with them. Unfortunately, this time of year, when I guess it didn't hit anybody at a good time, but with the COVID pandemic, certainly in the public works world, we try and get out the door with a lot of our construction projects in the springtime so that we can get those constructed during the nice weather in the summer. Likewise, we try and get the design projects moving so that we're ready to go for the next year. And oftentimes, like I said, a lot of our projects are very time sensitive when we're trying to meet growth demands and other health and safety aspects. So hopefully that generally answers the question.
I guess if I could supplement at least my perspective is that I assume that all the leadership of all the departments are aware of these declarations, and the mayor certainly is aware of action that you take before you bring it to council, because the mayor is the one that sets the agenda. So I'm drawing that assumption and pretty confident that it's accurate. Would you agree?
Yes, and I would certainly look to the mayor to agree as well, but
I would be happy to agree. No, we've got, obviously, I mean, again, behind the scenes, we go through each of these ones, and these are the questions that I fully go through them as well. And Steve comes prepared now with a lot of these questions, but we've gone through these and you know, again, these are the questions that I have as well. So
I can chime in on this one as well, Mayor, if you want me to. So in relation to, you know, the budget authority, the mayor sets the budget, and the council, of course, approves it. So the motions you have before you today are part and parcel of that authority, and the mayor has set forth certain expenditures. And ultimately, while the mayor sets the proclamation, the council, of course, has to approve it. So built into the motions, of course, are these modifications on a case-by-case basis that are brought forward to the legislative authority, which is the council, and they can consider individually these expenditures that are being proposed by the mayor. And so in that context, it fits in exactly with the RCW as far as the mayor sets the budget, council approves it. And so in that respect, it's consistent with the proclamation terms.
Thank you.
any other questions, Don, on, I guess, this project or in general? Or anyone else have any questions on this one? We're on the Northeast 22nd Avenue improvements one, right? All right, I'm trying to stay focused.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Hearing no further discussion, I move to award the 22nd Avenue improvements to McDonald Excavation Incorporated in the amount of $620,581.52, including a 10% authority for change orders.
Second.
It has been moved by Carter and seconded to award the 22nd Avenue improvements to McDonald Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $620,581.52, including a 10% authority for change orders. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right. Carly, can you walk us through the, and I forgot to get the correct pronunciation. I remember when we were reading it. Is it Ostenson?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, could you just clarify for the record that the last motion did in fact pass?
So it did in fact pass. Motion passes. The Ostenson Canyon Road Stormwater Improvements Professional Service Agreement. Carly, can you walk us through that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So for some time now, there's been some erosion going on at the outfall there at the near the intersection of 18th Loop. If you just go up just ways to the west, there's some guardrail there, and there's a stormwater outfall. It's eroded away the bank. There's actually a tree. If you go out and look, there's actually a tree that's freestanding. It's kind of hanging on by the roots, both ends. A great big hole out there. It's now started. It has eroded under the guardrail. It's also starting to erode under the pavement. So if you take a look out there now, our operations has put out fencing for safety reasons, but we really need to work on a safety solution for that. And that's indeed what we're trying to do here with this professional services agreement, which is really $44,255 for alternatives analyses. We really need to get a handle on what needs to be done. No matter what's done there, it's not an easy fix. It's quite a daunting task to get out there on the ledge and to try to fix this issue. So that's what we're starting out with, is the $44,255 to PBS for alternatives analysis. Staff recommends adoption, or staff recommends that council approve this agreement with PBS. I'd be happy to take any questions on this one as well.
Any questions for Curly or any comments? Steve?
Curly, is there one of the lanes shut down as a result of this?
Well, so there's no marked lanes out there, but technically it's less than 2 travel lanes wide. So currently, the good part of this is that there's not a lot of traffic on Austin Canyon Road, but we've put up safety measures to kind of warn the drivers that it's a narrow road in there and to take precautions. So, that's about the best I can answer it. It's not down to just one lane, but it's awfully tight. So,
yeah, so it's a safety issue. That's what I've heard from others. Thank you.
I see.
Yes.
Any other questions? Any motions?
I got a question.
Ellen?
I have a question. Yeah. Since this is the first phase to do some alternative assessments, what are we expecting? How are we expecting to be able to fund future phases when the construction actually takes place to fix this severe erosion?
Yeah, so this primarily, and I think there's might be a little leeway if we need to do some road work, or it would be considered street, but this is predominantly stormwater fund.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what this is. The stormwater. It's an urgent stormwater project.
Okay. And then any idea what kind of magnitude we can expect for total cost here?
Yeah, it's kind of like taking your car in after you got hit.
Oh, yeah.
And asking the mechanic to tell you before, or ask the shop owner to tell you what the damage is before he pulls the fender off. So a little tough. I don't know how big a numbers you're looking for. I could throw something out, but it's a guess right now. I mean, I'm thinking 300 to 500, but I don't.
Okay.
1,000, but I would hope you wouldn't hold me to.
It's not totaled.
Yes, I don't. Well, it can't be totaled. No.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions? Any motions?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve professional service agreements with PBS in the amount of $44.25 for the Austin Canyon stormwater improvements.
Second.
All right, it has been moved by Cheney and seconded to approve the professional service agreement with PBS in the amount of $44,255 for the Ostenson Canyon stormwater improvements. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is Parker Estates Pond Rehabilitation Professional Service Agreement. Steve, can you walk the council through this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Parker Estates stormwater facility that is the topic here is located on the north side of the Parker Estates subdivision, so just east of Parker and south of 38th Avenue. The pond itself is in need of rehabilitation, but in addition to that, the beavers along the stream corridor that's just downstream of the pond have created a number of dams, essentially, as the stream flows north towards 38th. And that has essentially backed up the storm facility. And then oftentimes it'll flood the adjacent property, which is private property. And then there's also a city well house, well number 9, for those of you that might be familiar with our wells. Has also had some flooding in the past. So the safety aspects here are driving this project forward, in addition to community comments about the pond essentially being overgrown and not functioning exactly the way that it was designed. So this project, the scope of work includes the design aspect, really 2 different designs. One is for beaver pond leveling system, if you will, that will maintain the beavers and the natural habitat that they've already created, but lower the water level and keep it to a point where the stream will flow and not back up not only the stormwater facility, but shouldn't flood the surrounding areas either. Staff went through a process and selected a consultant, and McKay Esposito was the successful proposer. They provided a scope of work for this effort of approximately $71,000. Funding for the project is through the Stormwater Fund, so it's dedicated in the sense that it can only be used for stormwater projects. We're prioritizing this project and actually Austinson Canyon Road from a budget perspective over two other projects that are included in the 2020 budget. And so basically there were Columbia Summit stormwater projects included in the 2020 budget, in the adopted budget. As we've looked at the intent of the Columbia Summit Estates projects versus both Austinson Canyon Road and Parker Estates Pond, these two projects are of a higher priority. And so what we're proposing is that these two projects be completed in lieu of the Columbia Summit projects. And those projects would just be shifted later in our capital improvement plan and be completed at a later time. We would obviously would come back and update council on what we find in the design and make sure that we have a good idea of what the construction cost estimates are before we go out to bid, so that council is aware and can essentially authorize that activity separately. So with that, we would recommend approval of the contract, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Steve? Steve?
So the beavers are staying?
They are. That was one thing that we talked about when we were putting the scope together. Essentially had the option of removing the beavers one way or the other, or trying to maintain their habitat and make everything work together. And we think we found a good solution there.
Thank you.
We are saving the beavers, Hogan. Any other questions for Steve? All right, any motions?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the professional services agreement with McKay Esposito in the amount of $71,029 for the Parker Estates Pond rehabilitation.
Second.
Second.
All right, it has been moved by Calder and seconded to approve the professional service agreement with McKay Esposito in the amount of $71,029 for the Parker Estates Pond rehabilitation. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next, Steve, you want to walk us through the Lower Prune Hill Booster Pump Station Improvements Professional Service Agreement, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The updated water system plan that was adopted last year identifies areas in the city's water system that need to be either upgraded or added to serve future growth. And actually, there's two items on your agenda tonight. This is the first, that are booster station projects that are essentially a way to move water through the system and boost water from a lower elevation to a higher elevation. And essentially, we need to do that in our system because all of our wells are located, most of them are located down by the Washougal River. And we have to get to the top of Prune Hill to serve those customers. And so we boost the water up basically to get to the top of the hill. The water system plan identified the Lower Prune Hill booster station as a needed upgrade for two reasons, one for capacity and the other one for reliability. The plan and additional analysis that we've done since the adoption of the plan would have us have that station online by 2022 to meet future growth. It's a multi-year project. And so basically, in order to hit the 2022 timeframe for construction, as we work backwards and talk about design and permitting activity, we need to be getting started now in order to meet that future timeframe for having that system online. We went through a process to select a consultant. Murray Smith was the successful proposer on this one, and provided a scope for what we're calling phase one. It's very similar to say the Austinson Canyon scope, where we need to look first at some of the preliminary analysis that was completed and really narrow in on a plan to figure out which alternative is going to be best suited for construction purposes and for the long-term needs. So that first phase of work is approximately $157,000. This project is included in the budget. Funding for this project is dedicated in the sense that it's water revenues that can only be paid for or only be used for water system projects. And further, we have the revenue bond that was issued in 2019, and this was one of the projects identified in the revenue bond that we knew we needed to move forward with. And so the revenue bond would be backed by system development charges and the water rates that we collect as part of the utility. And with that, we would recommend authorizing approval of the contract, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Steve? Ellen.
Question. Yes, Steve, when we implement these sorts of improvements to our pump stations, what capacity are we designing for? So how many years do we expect this to last? And what's the urgency in doing this?
Yeah, great question. So we typically plan in a 20-year horizon. So the comprehensive plan lays out the growth projections for the next 20 years and identifies the different zoning and the urban growth boundary. And so when we look at these projects, especially these major projects, we try and plan for that 20-year horizon to the best that we can. So that answers the first question. I think the second question on the urgency is we've been growing a lot the last few years. You heard Kathy and Phil talk earlier on the financial discussion about the number of permits that we've seen year over year. And then last year was especially heavy. You know, that's just the residential scene. When you look at the commercial projects that we've also had, and you look at what's happening in the city, that's the urgency. Our water system is in need of upgrades in numerous areas, and council will probably be hearing a lot from us over the next year or two on future projects.
Okay. And this is funded out of those utility bonds that we brought in 2019. So the funding is already procured?
That's correct.
And any impact to general fund?
No impact to general fund on any of these utility projects. They're all funded by the utility and the revenues that are associated with the utility itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any motions?
Mr. Mayor,
All right.
I move to approve the professional services agreement with Murray Smith in the amount of $156,986 for the Lower Prune Hill Booster Pump Station improvements.
Second.
It has been moved by Carter and seconded to approve the professional service agreement with Murray Smith in the amount of $156,986 for the Lower Prune Hill Booster Pump Station improvements. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Last here on the agenda, Steve, is the Forest Home Booster Station Improvement Professional Service Agreement. Can you please walk us through that one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So very similar to the Lower Prune Hill discussion, also identified in the city's water system plan. This one, though, the difference is that this was originally proposed in, say, the 5 to 7 year time frame in the capital improvement plan. In fact, that's why this project is actually not in the 2020 budget that's been adopted to date. As we went through the analysis on the Lower Prune Hill pump station, these two are essentially tied together. So the Forest Home pumps up to Lower Prune Hill, and so they act as a system. And when we looked at this initially in the plan, we thought that they could operate independently. Overall, as we look at it, it is better to use them as a system and have one pump to the other. And so with the additional analysis, essentially, we want to move this project up to 2020 to start it so that it can be done at essentially the same time frame as Lower Prune Hill. Gray and Osborne was the successful proposer on this one as we went through the consultant process. The scope of work at approximately 48,000 for the first phase. And again, that's a site analysis that will lead us towards the ultimate solution that they would move into design and construction on. Again, this one's not in the 2020 budget, but the proposal from staff would be that this would be in the upcoming omnibus. It would also be paid for with the revenue bond that was issued in 2019, along with potential for using some system development charges as well. But they're both dedicated revenues, if you will, that can only be used for water system projects. And again, we think this is the priority. And so that's where we're asking council for approval to move this up. And all of these projects that we're phasing, you know, we're doing that for multiple reasons. One, like Curly said, it's earlier, it's, you don't always know what the answer is. And so we got to go through a process to figure out what the best solution for each one of these projects is. The other thing is it gives us an opportunity to make sure that we're going down a good path. As we come up with those solutions, we're able to come back to council. We can have you look at these individually and make sure that as we move to the next step, everybody's comfortable that, you know, the good decisions are being made and that we're moving in a timely fashion. Either, you know, we're not going too slow, but we're also not going too fast and getting too far ahead of ourselves with things. So all of these, you know, as we move on to multiple phases, we'll come back to council for each phase and get additional approvals at that point in time. So it'd be check-ins along the way. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Steve?
I have one. And I think I caught it, but I'd just like to make sure I'm right. So Steve, can you characterize the difference in number 9, the Prune Hill, Lower Prune Hill and the Forest Home, and the difference in expense or bids?
As far as why one is 48,000 and the other is 156.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, basically different sites, different complexities that are involved, different consultants, and you know that have different hourly rates, but really they're different projects, and so it's kind of like trying to compare 2 road projects. They're all going to be slightly different, and they're all going to take a different level of analysis and expertise to complete.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any motions?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the professional services agreement with Gray and Osborne in the amount of $48,294 for the Forest Home Booster Pump Station improvements.
Second.
All right, it has been moved by Roberts and seconded to approve the professional service agreement with Gray and Osborne in the amount of $48,294 for the Forest Home Booster Pump Station improvements. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. And with that, Heather, we're going to pass it back over to public comments. Please state your name and address for the record. You have up to 3 minutes to share your message.
All right, first up we have Wayne.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council and administration folks that are there. Judith and Jared sort of stole my thunder, so I'm not going to talk very long because they pretty well spell it out. But I want to thank you all and the folks that are working for the city of Camas, keeping us going during this COVID process are doing an incredible job in my mind. I did want to tell you that I have been in the last couple of weeks in contact with over 200 of the seniors in our, and that would include some Washougal folks, but out of that bunch, they're all staying pretty healthy and staying sequestered, which they're supposed to do. And several of them have told me to let you know that when you're ready to break the rest of the world loose, they will be more than willing to stay sequestered and keep themselves safe. So that's my comments for tonight. Thank you all for what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Wayne, and thank you for what you're doing as well. And thank you for continuing to check in with the community. And I would concur as well that the staff has been doing an absolutely incredible job. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, to stay with the format, could we ask Wayne to give his address, please? If he's on still.
I'm sorry. I know enough to do that. 2919 Southeast 2nd Avenue in Camas.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilmember Cheney. All right, next up we have Marie.
Looks like she's still on mute there.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Marie Tabata Kalarami, 5724 Northwest El Rey Drive. Thank you guys for your service to our community, first off. I really appreciate that, and it's a thankless job. I'm here to talk about the Lacamas Shores biofilter maintenance. Recently, the algae blooms in Lacamas Lake have brought this issue again to the public's attention. So I don't know if everyone knows, but algae blooms in Lacamas Lake do not happen without phosphorus running off from our communities. The Lacamas Shores biofilter was created to filter out phosphorus, fertilizer, and other pollutants draining from our lawns. It is not doing the job right now. So when we spoke during the last August public comments, we noted that our HOA planned to clean out the pipes to improve the water flow, but they did not plan to fix the plants and grasses, which is the 5 acres of the 5.9 acre biofilter. We noted that this could make matters worse by washing 30 years of decay into the lake. Well, the HOA fixed the pipes only, and this year we had the first April algae bloom in Lacamas Lake and Round Lake in over a decade. In fact, of thousands of lakes in our state, this year only 3 have been closed so far due to algae toxins, and 2 of them are ours. I'm sure this won't be the last closing, and a closed lake is only good for pictures. A toxic lake can be lethal to pets and even to humans. Now, I know many Camasonians are interested in stopping the algae blooms now and are working towards a solution. I also know that the process is long, 1 to 2 years before thorough testing even starts, and 10 to 20 years before implementing and completing a plan. The solution? Fix the biofilter. Bringing it back to peak performance can be completed within a couple months, and it is at virtually no cost to the city, unlike all the other agenda items. 10 to 20 years versus a couple months. So the biofilter was created for a reason. The compliance standards were created for a reason. There's really no good reason to allow the Lacamas Shores biofilter to continue to fail. Cleaning the lake water is a good thing, and every little bit counts. So I offer my assistance to work with the city and the HOA to get the Lacamas Shores biofilter back up to efficient filtering. In August, we said—
30 seconds.
Thank you. In August, we said it won't get any better by itself. Now it looks like it will only get worse if we do not act quickly. I also wanted to thank those that responded to my recent email, and I hope that we can meet to go over concerns that the city may have about this issue. I think it would make a big difference. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Marie, for your comments. Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Scott. Go ahead.
McElhaney?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Scott McElhaney, 4227 Northwest Sage Loop here in Camas. I'm really glad you're taking care of that Parker States pond. My wife and I and girls walk by that often, almost every day. And we look at that and we didn't realize there was a problem. We were kind of wondering, no, but that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Council Member Hogan and Council Member Roberts, thank you for acknowledging the staff and the hard work that they do. I echo that and appreciate that. Back in about December or January, Councilmember Hogan, you made a comment, it might have been in a workshop or a city council meeting, about somebody approached you about the safety of crossing 3rd Street on or in or around Birch or Cedar. That was a while ago. I think it's time to look at that again. Her daughter dances at the dance studio. My wife and I have a Thursday night happy hour, and we go to pick her up and walk back and forth. And sometimes we're just scared to death to walk across in the evening, right there at 3rd and I think it's 3rd and Birch is really the one that we have an issue with. But nevertheless, might be something to look at. Since we're talking about health and safety. And instead of the farmers market, I know that's coming up, and from what I understand, the city has to approve it. I don't know if it's the council members or the city itself, but I would recommend that we do an approval of that if it hasn't been done already under specific situation or circumstances. Sure would love to attend the farmers market. We enjoyed attending that for years now. And instead of something really important, I'm gonna ask Kathy a question you probably can't answer, but I saw in your report, which was great, by the way, but as a city, we get $331,000 a year in liquor revenue. That's great. That's amazing. But I was doing the math and I was thinking, I don't really know what our split from the 8.6 whatever rate is, but I was doing the math and I thought, well, if we get 2% of that, that's $16.5 million a year that Camas citizens spend on liquor. And I thought, well, is that all liquor or is that liquor and food at the establishment? Anyway, just as a light side note, you don't have to acknowledge that. It's me being silly, but I thought that was interesting. $331,000 a year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, for your comments.
All right, Joel McConnell.
Hi, my name's actually Joelle, but it's spelled like Joel, so I understand. I live at 5440 Northwest 15th Circle here in Camas. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Mayor Barry, but the City Council, and the efforts they've made to communicate with us as a community. I, in the last 6 months or so, have felt more informed than I have in the past. So the continued effort to keep us informed through YouTube videos and mailers have been really, really appreciated, and especially the efforts to reach those greatly and negatively impacted by what's going on in the community with COVID-19. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and just that I appreciate the efforts navigating this unprecedented time. So just that's it. Thank you. I love living here. We've been here for about 5 years, and I'm just grateful for the way that the community is going. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Joelle. It was very nice. Thank you.
Next, we have John Lay.
Hi, John Lee, 444 Northwest Fremont Street again. I wanted to thank Marie for bringing up the algae blooms on Camas Lake, and assuming I appreciate her passion, number one, but assuming her statement was correct, that the problem is the biofilter in one neighborhood, number one, and number two, if her statement's accurate that it would cost the city nothing, none of our taxpayer problems to fix the problem, why aren't we getting that fixed? Who is responsible, I guess, for enforcing water quality standards? Is it the city? Is it the county? I know the state has water quality standards. Do we need the city council to ask the state to come in and enforce their water quality standards? Or do we need the city to ask the county to come in and enforce the water quality standards? Or is it something you can enforce? Is it a permit fee? What's the problem or the issue there? If there's a fix that's not going to cost taxpayers, I absolutely love it. And if it's the responsibility of a neighborhood, you know, I don't want to impose the burden on them, but by golly, I don't want to impose the burden on everyone. So it seems to me that I had the feeling her homework was pretty thorough there, and I've heard that the problem is a biofilter. What's it going to take for us to enforce the water quality standards? I'd love to see the lake get clean because we all love it and we would like to be able to use it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I love to fix problems as well with no money. And it is something that we're looking at and working with the county. So it is something that I'm getting involved with, but we'll start to share that as we get more information.
All right, we have Heidi next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Heidi Echeverrio. My address is 126 Northeast 15th Avenue, Camas. I would just like to recognize the convenience and ease with watching the council meetings online. Thank you for providing this opportunity for the citizens of Camas. And I hope moving forward that this same meeting format will continue to be available. I also really welcome the idea mentioned by the mayor at the beginning of the meeting about providing the AMA town hall style meetings beginning this summer. This seems that it would fulfill a desire by our citizens to have their voices heard. And in closing, I would just like to say I'm grateful to Mayor McDonald for all that he has done thus far in office, as well as a compliment to our council members and all city workers for your service to our community, especially during this global pandemic. Thank you for continuing to fulfill your obligations and your responsibilities to the city. You are appreciated.
Thank you very much, Heidi. That was very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's it. And I have checked the public comments inbox, and there were no additional comments, new comments that arrived during the course of the meeting.
Well, with that, I will call the meeting and adjourn the meeting. Is that the correct way, Sean, to say it? I end the meeting, and
Meeting adjourned.
meeting is adjourned. All right. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good night.